But what has to be coupled with that is aligned curriculum, and we also have to have teachers executing best practices with fidelity. And so when we highlight the workshop model is successful whether you're a teacher in kindergarten or a teacher in 12th grade, regardless of content area. And the whole premise is that there's a mini lesson, and the smaller you are, the more mini the lesson. And then there's a middle activity part, and then a metacognitive piece where you come back and you share your thinking and your learning. So the middle piece is where we collect data on a daily basis. And so state scores certainly have their place, and they certainly help us make decisions. But what's even more important is the daily data collection that teachers derive. And so when you were in this very formative way of collecting data in the middle part of the activity, so after you've taught your lesson, students go off to do the activity, whatever that may be. At that point, the teacher is very busy going around the room, meeting in small groups, meeting with students, and where your success may be in one day as a student, you may have a deficit in another. And so that's where you organize your lesson planning accordingly, and then you infuse this whole enrichment and intervention piece. So during that chunk of intervention and enrichment piece, the teacher can then put students together in guided groups to be able to meet the needs of the lots from the day before. So it's a very fluid process. So we're not waiting on data that we got in October and then what the results are again in May. This is daily ongoing data that needs to be shared, and this is how we best meet students when we're talking about closing those achievement gaps and what we call the bubble kids, where they just need that little nudge. And so that happens because you take charge of what you see on a very daily basis. I don't know if that helps.
No, it does.
Excellent.
I think too,
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I remember in past years, especially at middle school, we had this pilot math program, we had that pilot math program, we had this pilot math program. What did it come down to? What was the conclusion? We just voted on a lot of curricular materials at the end of this past year. So do we have the curriculum that our students need and our teachers want and are able to teach in place in all of our subjects in all of our schools?
I can honestly say at this point, we have curriculum in place, but it's not aligned. And so we have when I first arrived in Taylor and I walked through the annex, I thought, oh my gosh, we hit the jackpot. I saw all of these amazing materials, very rich materials, meet all of the heavy hitters in terms of who the instruction and curriculum gurus are. Where I think the important thing for us to do is to pull it all together. And so if we're using, for example, Words Your Way in one building in kindergarten, we use it in all buildings. And so that's the expectation, is that I think what's happened is that there are very rich materials in every one of the schools. So do we have curriculum in place? Absolutely. Do we have aligned curriculum? It's a work in progress. So it's being looked at very seriously. We've already had a survey sent out to principals, and so they're coming back, they're speaking with their school improvement staff to be able to figure out exactly what the building needs are and what our district needs are, and we're going to pull it together. So I hope at this time next year, I have a more solid conversation to have.
So, without trying to be facetious, but you said you walked through the annex and saw all this rich material. It doesn't do us a whole lot of good, the material sitting in the annex.
So let me clarify, so forgive me.
Just clarify, please.
Absolutely. So once material, you always have to have an exemplar on the shelf so you know what you have. So it's not like I saw a district-wide full of material stuck on the shelf. I saw an example of what exists in the building, so I'm sorry.
Yes.
Just wanted to make sure.
We make sure pretty much, I never like to keep anything on my shelf that can't be used, and I always either give to the teachers, and if they don't want it, I try to sell it so I can buy additional for it.
Reports of years past where all kinds of stuff had been ordered and it sat there for a school year or whatever.
No, there would be one or two examples, but I know the names to look for, so when I saw the names and kits and things that have been purchased, I was quite impressed.
I think it's good that you're in this position and Ben's in this position as far as looking at our curriculum, because I know what they say when people assume, and I have assumed that our curriculum was aligned and consistent across the district, and what I'm hearing is that it's not. And my question has, if people are doing different curriculums in different buildings, you just listed an example. So if we're not consistent, then why are we not consistent?
That's an interesting question to answer without a quick answer. So the quickest answer that I can give you is that I don't think that the curriculum that we've had before Mr. Williamson and getting here was poorly chosen or was bad. I just think that if you were able to have Word Your Way and Fontes and Pinnell and a DRA model, and you were able to choose one of the three, how it's being executed now has no consistency because, let's say, for example, and I just surmising, if one building were to choose one program and another building were to choose another program that's similar, it's one company versus another company. But now there's a slight difference, and now not only is the material different, but now the way that it's possibly going to be implemented is different. And so it's not that it was bad. I think that it just really needs to be pulled together. So this is not by any means to be a criticism of anything that has gone on in the past. I think that's just sort of paved the way for this great opportunity for us to pull it together.
And I wasn't implying that what we're doing is bad or not good for kids, but, and it's just been my understanding that things were consistent because the board has asked for consistency across the board for years. So if that's not where we're at, that's where we need to be. And I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, that was my same thought, because for years we have been asking, mandating, whatever the word is, that we wanted a student that went to West and moved to Hoover, we would assume that that would be the same kind of school. But we know that's not true.
Can I just clarify though, are we saying they're getting the same, there's curriculum and then there's content? The content is going down the same in every building.
Correct.
Because the content is the content and the pacing is the same. So there, if you go to Eureka Heights and then to Myers in the month of September, we know which content you have to get, and they should be getting the same at the same time. It just might be taught with a different curriculum to support that content. So it could be Word Your Way, it could be the phonics, it could be the DRA. That's just the part that I'm trying to grade.
But even sometimes, and I know that I'll get opposition to this, but even sometimes within the same school, it's not the same program being used from classroom to classroom.
So that's why I think there are 4 things, and I know we've talked about them, but just to highlight. So if we're going to move in a positive direction, I think it's really important to align that at the start of kindergarten and move our way up. And this is not going to be a quick lift. It's a heavy lift, so it's going to have to be slow and methodical so that we do it with due diligence. And so if we align the curriculum in all 4 content areas, and then we mandate the teaching minutes, as a district, we're going to decide, based on what best practices and what state suggestions are, how many minutes each core content level will be taught on a daily basis. So that within a day, I know as a kindergarten teacher that I have to teach X number of minutes of language arts, and I'm going to do it on this master block from this time to this time. And I know I have to teach so many minutes in science, and so many minutes in social studies, and so many minutes in math. And then you overlay that with a workshop model, where in every core content area, you've got a lesson, you've got an activity, and then we talk about our learning. So if that's the wheel of best practice, and then when you look at, so in the middle part, when the teacher's collecting that data to see where the deficits are, then you have that intervention model that gets put into place. So then you're actually honing in with the data that you collect to figure out where do we need to go. So with those systems in place, it'll be more challenging to deviate. And so I think once we have a consistent way of doing it, you won't see those kinds of problems. And if there are, then those are critical conversations to have about supporting the curriculum that the board has approved. You know, the other piece is then the best practice piece with coaching and the whole idea of a plan, teach, to brief model, and embedding that professional development so that we lift the leadership teaching capacity within our district. So our own teachers are the ones that are actually going to become the coaches. And then finally, the whole idea of accountable talk when we have students having a voice to learn. So Mr. Myers, when you're talking about having the students, within that mini lesson, when the teacher's actually teaching, the best practice approach is long gone for the days for Johnny, Paul, and Sally to be leading the discussion because they're the ones who are most vocal and the most teacher-pleasing and seem to have all of the right answers. The opportunity in a mini lesson when you actually offer these turn and talk moves, which is considered one of the best practices, everyone in the class has a voice. So you'll throw something out as a teacher and you'll say, turn to your neighbor and have a quick conversation. And so you don't have a choice, you have to be involved in the lesson because you're going to possibly be called on. So then the kids talk. The teacher says, okay, let's go back together. So, Mr. Byers, what did you and Mr. Miller talk about? So you have to share what your thoughts are, and then other children will be able to piggyback on your thoughts or refute it or say possibly, but maybe not exactly that way, so that you see that there's all kinds of a growth mindset and higher order thinking that's going on other than who has the right answer. So they take that back to the activity piece, and then they're collaborating again, and then we come back and actually talk about, so we learned something, we tried it on, wow, after we tried it on, here's what I now know. So if that's done on a daily basis, with the core content put in place, there's no way that we can't be successful.
Oh yeah, and it offers interaction between kids that sometimes don't talk to the other kids, so that's awesome.
It's dynamic.